This is not a conspiracy. This is the new Jimmy Savile. UN security staff trafficked 14 and 15-year-old girls out of Moldova into Bosnia during the war, chained them up in a nightclub called Florida 2000 for the exclusive use of UN staff.
Chained them?
Chained them.
What do you mean, that chained them where?
In cages in the nightclub. They were sex slaves trafficked by UN staff. Certain aid workers prevented families from entering refugee camps unless they handed over a child for sexual favours.
So you can go on the record and say that the UN knew about
this?
Yeah. And they were covering it up?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think this goes all the way to the top?
Yes. When there is a pandemic going on that is spread by bodily fluids, WHO staff, World Health Organization staff were abusing women in Eastern Congo. The people who know this best are the women on the ground. There are now protests in Eastern Congo with women saying, please, UN, leave. You were supposed to bring us peace. You were supposed to bring us security. You did not bring us peace and you raped us. Can you please leave? Social media is now the main mechanism between predator and prey. Mark Zuckerberg should go to jail. Trump is a funny beast. My DNA shows that I'm his fourth cousin once removed via his mother, Mary Ann Macleod. All right, I'm going to say something publicly, and this is the first time I'm saying it to anyone publicly.
Andrew Macleod, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you give us a few lines of introduction so we all know the kind of work that you've done in the past, where you've worked, and the issues that you're focused on now.
My name's Professor Andrew Macleod. I'm an Australian-British dual national. I specialised in war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide. Through the 1990s, I worked for the International Committee for the Red Cross in Yugoslavia, Rwanda, countries like that. Did a short stint in Australian politics, then moved across to the UN, ran major natural disaster operations in countries like Pakistan, Philippines and so on. The more senior I became in the system, the more I became aware of the enormous amount of abuse of women and children at the hands of UN staff, not just peacekeepers, but civilian staff. And I got senior enough to realise I couldn't change it from inside, I had to change it from outside. And the most atrocious thing that everyone agrees is wrong is don't rape children. But it's been surprisingly hard to get the UN to accept that.
You've made claims that there are tens of thousands of children that have been raped by staff members at aid organisations, from the UN to charities we're all familiar with. Take us behind the scenes. What's the playbook? Why is it that these child predators are targeting aid organisations in order to gain access to vulnerable children? Take us into the story.
Let's start off by saying what it's not. This is not a secret conspiracy of pedophiles sucking each other in from a basement in Washington, D.C. It's simply a matter of opportunity to offend, lack of preventative mechanisms, and therefore offence takes place. The National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom estimate about 1 in 35 men have paedophilic tendencies, about 3%. How they got that data, I'm not sure, but it kind of makes sense to me. The Child Abuse Inquiry in Australia found that 7% of the Catholic clergy participated in paedophilia. So if the underlying prevalence is 3, and an industry that attracts people is 7, where does the aid industry sit? Well, the National Crime Agency has also said that as we crack down on predatory pedophiles in the developed world, the predators now go to the developing world, and the chosen methodology they use to get access to children is to join a children's charity. And when I say that out loud, 2 thoughts go through most people's minds. 1, that's disgusting, which it is, and 2, that's logical, which it is. Predators go to where there's prey. So if you say that the aid industry is more likely to be closer to the Catholic Church than the underlying prevalence, more close to 7 than 3%, let's say the middle 5%. There's about 500,000 aid workers in the world today, about 300,000 of those are male, about 5% of which is 15,000. Is it a safe starting assumption to say there's somewhere around about 15,000 men with pedophilic tendencies working in the aid industry today, controlling food, water and shelter and having access to women and children? That's the safe starting assumption. And people will start to sit up, bolt upright on that. And then I'll make another controversial statement. The problem of pedophilia in the aid industry is worse than the Catholic Church. And people will say, how do you know that? And I say, well, there are more aid workers than there are Catholic priests. in more countries than the Catholic Church is present in. What makes you think the average aid worker is any ethically better than a Catholic priest? And you'll say, well, none really. So it's a simple matter of mathematics. Mm-hmm. We now start to believe children when they say Father Brown or Father Smith did this or that to me. We're still not believing children in the developing world when they say this UNICEF worker or that Oxfam worker did it to me. Mm-hmm. People are shocked when something like the Haiti scandal from 2017 came out, in which we saw that there were sex parties in the homes of staff of Oxfam who were funded by our taxpayer funds to go there and do this. Mm-hmm. That our taxpayer funds are funding pedophiles to have access to children. In the case of the Haiti scandal, most of the women were over 18, but there was one who was 17. When you start to realise that it's our taxpayer funds that is going into these aid industries, and they have no effective preventative mechanisms to stop abuse, and when abuse is uncovered, they cover it up rather than prosecute, then you start to ask what the heck is going on. And if people say, Andrew, are you exaggerating the problem? I will simply give them one piece of data to look at in most aid agencies. How many of their staff have they reported to the police for prosecution for an abuse? And the answer is almost zero. Mm-hmm. Zero is the most powerful statistic. Mm-hmm. Zero is impossible. The only three answers to have zero reports to police is you are turning a willful blind eye, you are deliberately complicit, mm-hmm. or you've got some magic wand in which you've recruited into your agency no predators. Mm-hmm. Not possible. And even if that was possible and you'd recruited into your agency zero predators, mm-hmm. and you didn't share that magic wand with everybody else, mm-hmm. you're also evil. Mm-hmm. So it's a controversial statement to say there is abuse happening in the brand names that we love, Oxfam, Save the Children, UNICEF. And it's tempting to go, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist or a big right-wing conspiracy theorist who hates foreign aid. And I just go, no, just move all of that aside and look at basic data and just this simple question. There is an opportunity to offend. There is no preventative mechanism in place that works. So, of course, offence happens.
Wow. So far, this has been going on for how many years now that you're aware of?
Since the foundation of the UN, since the foundation of NGOs. Okay. See, the thing is that the heart of this abuse is an imbalance of power. Mm-hmm. And we see this all around the world, whether it is a boss sexually harassing a staff member, sure. whether it's a government official sexually harassing a person in the street. There is no greater imbalance of power in the world today than that between aid worker and aid beneficiary. Mm-hmm. No greater imbalance of power than that between the starving person and the person controlling food.
Okay, so give me some examples of how this really plays out in the real world. Like the UN peacekeepers show up, or a charity rocks up into a region in the Central African Republic. What happens?
So let's put aside peacekeepers for a second. Okay. Let's just talk about civilian staff of the UN, white people like me and you. I'll also start by talking about something well in the public, because I say to people, if you do not believe me, Google what I'm about to tell you. Very easy to find. Food for sex scandals in West Africa in the early 2000s. Massive loads of reports are done on this, and you can find it online. Certain aid workers prevented families from entering refugee camps unless they handed over a child for sexual favours. Documented.
Yeah, wow.
Or, in the words of an 11-year-old girl in Bangui in Central African Republic, I didn't have breasts yet and he still raped me. Or the words of the girls in Haiti, I did this for some biscuits for my family. So when you start Googling it, you're like, this guy is not crazy. It's there. Mm-hmm. It's in public. Mm-hmm. And then people will get as angry about it as I am. If it's so obvious and it's in public, why has nothing been done? Mm-hmm. Susan Bartell and Sabine Lee, two academics from Birmingham University in the UK and Queen University in Canada, did a survey of about 2,500 women in Haiti and found 160 children born of UN peacekeeping soldiers from an interview of only 2,500 women. And that's only talking about peacekeeping soldiers, not the civilian aid workers as well. If you extrapolated that out to the 2.5 million women that are of childbearing age in Haiti, how many children are there? And
we're talking tens of thousands.
Yes, over generations.
Fatherless.
And what we have done in a lot of the work that I'm doing that we'll come to in a moment, which is finding children abandoned by their fathers or left behind by sex tourists, abusive aid workers and soldiers, that's their number one question. Who am I? Mm-hmm. It's not about child support or finance or passports, even though that's possible and helpful. Mm-hmm. The thing that if we find the fathers for children is they suddenly know who they are. Mm-hmm. Or, put it the other way, the amount of damage these men leave behind. You know, yes, they had fun with a prostitute or a local woman or even a genuine relationship for a short time, but what gets left behind is a child who has no identity, a woman in poverty, a child in poverty, who then often the mother has to choose between school and food. Mm-hmm. That's what these men leave behind.